I know many of you have heard stories like this before, but I still want to share mine, hoping someone can learn from it before it's too late. Maybe this is my last chance to face the truth about what I've done. So here it goes. I was with my husband, Daniel, for over 8 years. We met when we were young. I was 21. He was 23. We fell in love, and it felt like a fairy tale. We had a solid relationship, so we decided to move in together. I thought I had it all: love, a reliable partner, a stable future. The first few years were great. Everything was fine, but eventually, things started to change. It wasn't that I suddenly felt unhappy. It was more of a creeping feeling that grew over time. It was the routine, the security. We went to bed at the same time, spent weekends together, and went through the days without really experiencing anything new. It was comfortable, but somehow, it also felt monotonous. I felt like something was missing. Then, as life often goes, something came along that reignited that spark. It started with a harmless glance, a flirt here and there, reminding me that I was still desirable. I wanted to feel the confirmation that I was attractive, but it didn't stop at just one look. That was my first mistake. I wanted more. It was like an addiction. When I got attention from another man, I felt alive. I started meeting up with other guys secretly, behind Daniel's back. And every time I did it, I told myself it's just some fun. He'll never find out. But deep down, I knew I was destroying something. Daniel, of course, noticed the changes. I started coming home later, often with excuses like I had to stay late at work or I was with a friend. But when I looked in the mirror, I knew I was lying. Eventually, he asked me, "Why are you coming home so late? What's going on?" I brushed it off. "Oh, nothing. Just a lot going on." He didn't know, but he sensed something wasn't right. And I started feeling more and more uncomfortable, knowing it wouldn't be long before he figured it out. One incident that still sticks in my mind happened one night when I came home late. I was meeting one of the guys from work at a cafe that was relatively quiet. It was thrilling, this rush, the secrecy. But when I left the cafe, I had a feeling everything was about to change. My phone rang as I got into my car. It was Daniel. "Where are you?" he asked, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "You just told me you were at work. What's going on?" I knew he was already suspicious. It was the moment when I started rummaging through my head for excuses that had served me well over the years. But something in his voice made me doubt that these lies would work this time. I stammered something about a meeting that ran longer than expected, but there was a quiet doubt in his voice. "Are you sure?" he asked again. I knew he could feel it, but I didn't want him to know the truth. "Yeah, it's fine," I said quickly, hanging up. My heart raced, but I drove to the other man. I knew I was crossing a line, but somehow, it felt like there would be no going back. It wasn't the first time I came home after one of those nights and realized I was losing myself in a lie. But what happened next changed everything. A week later, I received a message from one of the guys I'd been seeing secretly. The message seemed harmless, or so I thought. It read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. See you later. You know how much I miss you." I looked at my phone and then Daniel appeared behind me. I had the feeling he'd see it immediately. I tried to hide the screen quickly, but he'd already seen it. It wasn't a clear message, not a confession of love, but enough to raise his suspicions. I could feel the tension in the air. "What's this?" he asked, his voice cold, a tone I'd never heard from him before. "What does this mean?" I stammered, trying to defuse the situation. "It's nothing. Just a friend, we talk a lot about work." But at that moment, I knew he didn't believe me anymore. The pain in his eyes was indescribable. That was the moment he started questioning everything. But I still thought I had everything under control, didn't I? Or so I thought. Then he began questioning my excuses. "Where were you really yesterday?" he asked one evening. "I know you said you were with your friend, but you never answered when I called." I had no answer. I'd gotten so tangled up in my lies that I couldn't even figure out what the truth was anymore. I looked at myself in the mirror. It felt like I was staring into an abyss, but I couldn't turn back. My lies were suffocating me, but I kept trying to justify them. I told you. I was with her, I whispered in a moment of desperation. But the doubt in his eyes told me he no longer believed me. And then there was that other man. He was different. So different. I couldn't help but think about him when I was with Daniel. Every touch, every word he said sent shivers down my spine. He had this presence that Daniel never had. When I thought of him, I remembered the way his muscles moved beneath his skin, how strong and defined he was. He had this gaze, intense and deep, a look that devoured me. It was like he could see into me in a way Daniel never could. I remember recently, when I went to bed with Daniel, I was only thinking about him, about the way he looked at me, how he touched me. It was so much more exciting than anything I'd ever experienced with Daniel. Daniel was soft, kind, a good husband, but there was just no fire. This other man made me feel alive. He brought back everything I had lost in my relationship. It was unfair, I knew it, but I couldn't stop. I left the bedroom after a hug with Daniel and drove to him without hesitation. In those moments, it felt like I was entering a world where nothing else mattered. The difference between them was like night and day. Daniel, so patient and understanding, stood in stark contrast to this man, who, with a single touch, shook my world. But this world had its consequences, and soon, they could no longer be ignored. The truth was, I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. I was trapped in a game. I had staged myself. I didn't want to lose Daniel, but at the same time, I couldn't give up the rush from the other men. I felt like if I stopped this behavior, I'd lose part of myself. But I didn't just lose a piece of myself, I lost everything. It was a late evening when I came home. Daniel was sitting in the living room, staring at me. He seemed calm, but I knew what was coming. "You've lied to me over and over," he said, his voice firm and determined. "I've had enough. I know everything. You're cheating on me and I can't ignore it anymore." I just stood there. What could I say? What could I say that would make any sense? Every thought I had was a lie that no longer held weight. "Daniel, I'm sorry," was all I could manage. But his eyes, full of disappointment and anger, said it all. "You've destroyed me, but this is your choice. I won't be able to trust you again." The next day, when he left to stay with a friend, I knew I couldn't undo it. I spent the whole day at home. The pain was unbearable, but somehow, there was also an emptiness that lingered. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty room. My thoughts were spinning. It was like every moment I had spent with Daniel was now just a memory. I wanted to explain everything to him, to tell him how much I loved him, but I knew it was too late. He had seen the truth. In the following days, I tried to apologize, but all I did was create more distance between us. Daniel had made his decision to break up, and that was probably best for both of us. But it was also the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I didn't just lose his love. I lost a part of myself that I'll never get back. A few weeks later, something happened that knocked me off my feet. I had just come back from another one of those nights where I tried to fill the emptiness with quick distractions. But that night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of the men I'd been in contact with. "Remember what you promised me," it read. It wasn't what I had hoped for. Just a reminder that I had destroyed something irreversible. I stepped out onto the terrace and looked at the empty streets. It was like I could see from afar a part of myself that was gone forever. I knew there was no way to fix it. I had lost everything. Daniel had done what I'd never dared to do. He had let go, and I knew I would never get that chance again. Now I sit here, writing these words to recognize my mistakes. I can't go back, and what I've done is irreversible. But if you're reading this and recognize yourself in this story, stop. Don't let yourself be tempted by something that brings only temporary pleasure. In the end, you'll lose far more than you could ever imagine. I hope my story can at least help someone avoid this path.